on let's stay on the Hollywood stuff. So Dick Wolf is the executive producer or the creator of Law and Order, and he is kind of the mastermind of it. And he and his wife Christine got a divorce over 15 years ago. They were divorced, Denise, and when they got divorced, believe it or not, it was laid out what she received. Apparently, she received $17.5 million in cash this 15 years ago. And by the way, the date today, for those of you who are listening to this in the future, 100 years from now, is 5/4/19. Yeah, that's it. $17.5 million in cash, and spousal support as much as $2 million for 8 years. And
$2 million per year.
Per year for 8 years, yes. And the couple's main home. Now, what happened was, at the time they settled this divorce, this is what's bizarre. Ready for this? Law and Order was only worth an estimated of $4 million at that time because the show was losing money. And so she has the divorce, but something happened. What happened? Well, guess what? Yep, not that. He came into a new $1 billion deal with NBC Universal for Law and Order right after that, and after she had signed the settlement, basically, agreement in mediation. And Todd was saying earlier, isn't that great? Todd's like, the courier's got our signs. Find the courier, hurry. George, go get the courier.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, we don't know if this whole thing is contingent on when NBC Universal signed to pick up Law and Order for billions of dollars, and you're trying to figure that out. It's kind of hard, but if that was after the settlement documents had been signed but before they were delivered, you could just see them going, "Stop the courier, we need more money." But it might have been years afterwards. That we're trying to figure that out.
I'm thinking that it was years afterwards. The divorce happened in 2003, and like a lot of people when they go through a divorce, they go to mediation. When they go to mediation, it is a confidential process that the parties control. They get to decide their agreements. They get to decide if something's not working. They get to decide timing, and they have somebody who is a neutral mediator that's assisting them through the process. It keeps a lot of private facts private, so that you're just getting the very, ending of the judgment into the court with very little information that the public can get out of that judgment. And it's a very good process, folks. I do it all the time, and I really live. I think this is one of the best ways to approach a divorce, especially if you can communicate together and come up with agreements. Now, in California, and this is a California case, in California, we have what is called confidential mediation.
And most states have the same basic thing.
That's right.
So again, we're talking about general topics of law, so seek local counsel, but many of these general laws are covered in different states with little tweaks.
Right, and in California, we actually have an evidence code that provides for there to be a mediation privilege. That means that everything that happens in the mediation process is privileged and cannot be used against anybody in the court of law, and that includes the mediator. So we've got this case where wife is saying, or former wife is saying, the mediator was biased. The financial group that the mediator worked with and for gave us false numbers and valued Law and Order really low and said it was losing money when, in fact, it wasn't, and they were just getting ready to really spin off Law and Order and make a ton of money off of Law and Order and the spin-offs that came from Law and Order. And they did it all to my detriment. That's basically what her claim was. So the trial court, so this was raised in trial court. And how did she raise it? She brought a request to set aside the judgment or the underlying agreement that became the judgment. And the trial court said, nope, mediation privilege, you can't go after the mediator or the financial group because they were part and parcel of this mediation. There's no evidence you can bring before this court, and they weren't biased. So we're not going to do that, and found that there was no bias, and then ruled against her. You got a fair deal. You agreed to the mediation process. You're bound by the mediation privilege information, and you cannot use this in court. So then what does she do?
Appeal somewhere.
Of course, she appeals. And what did the appellate court do? The appellate court said, I affirm the judgment of the trial court.
Here's some interesting things that I want to bring up. There's an interesting thing. So the mediator, this is what I like. The mediator, after it's all said and done, Mr. Wolf sends the mediator a nice, expensive watch as a gift for conclusion of mediation, saying, "Thanks, buddy. That one turned out good. Here's a Rolex." I don't know if it's a Rolex, but it's true. This actually happened.
That's true.
And the appellate court said that by itself did not prove that there was bias during the mediation proceedings. But look,
and the judges had nice watches on too. Huh?
Yeah, they all had nice. But let's put it this way. It might not have done that, but the optics just look bad when somebody is getting a payoff. Now, we had talked about the timing of NBC Universal, this deal, right? And I think that if it had been a situation where she signed the documents and while the courier is moving them over, he strikes this big deal, I think maybe in that regard, how do you keep something like that secret? And that probably should have been something that was disclosed, the valuation or whatever, if it occurred at that point in time.
Absolutely.
But according to what I have found, the deal with NBC Universal took place 13 years later. It was signed in 2016.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, it was losing money in 2003, but 13 years later, if I do this, how do you say I'm trying? Here's the argument. So I have Law and Order, and I'm going to let it continue to lose money for another 13 years just to stick it to my ex-spouse, and then I'm going to... If that's your allegation, you're all wet. That's just dark matter.
Yeah. And a bad tattoo. My question is, when is this is the problem with divorce and media? When is it actually over? For a guy like Dick Wolf. I mean, here's this thing. The money's paid. She's got the house. She gets $2 million a year. Okay, it's done. And that seems to be a problem to me. Is that when is something? I mean, the purpose of divorce is it's over. It's done. Thank you. You get your money. Leave me alone.
Let's put it this way. She has one more appeal to the Supreme Court, so it may not be done.
Let me answer that. And I'm not the divorce lawyer. Maybe you can answer this.
No, go ahead.
There's two. It never ends while there's kids under the age of 18.
Right, minor children. We get that.
Yeah,
right,
that's never going to end.
Right.
And the second thing, it never ends, Denise, true, is depending upon how long they're married, and every state is different, the alimony could go on the rest of their lives, depending upon how long they're married.
In this particular case, though, he paid more spousal support up front, $2 million a year, and then they had an 8-year cutoff. So this one looked like he bought the termination date.
Okay. And I will
but he front-loaded it.
He front-loaded it. He bought it fair and square.
This is the cynical side to me, but I will add one more category in terms of how long will this last. And it will last for as long as you have in the case of these two parties, one party making substantially more than the other party, and something that they feel like they can tap into. When you look at the facts here, so they split up in 2003. The divorce was final in 2003. She got $17.5 million in cash and $2 million a year for 8 years. All right. 8 years after 2003 puts you to what? 2011. So that's when her $2 million a year ran out. And then you start looking at how long did the $17.5 million last? She kept that at another $2 million a year. That kind of goes on, plus the $4 million. She's running out of cash about the time he makes this $16 billion or this $1 billion deal. And it's like, I'm out of money. I need to sue you some more. So it lasts for as long as he stays successful.
And the fun part of this is it was a motion for summary judgment that was granted, and that was at the trial level. The appellate court upheld that motion for summary judgment, wouldn't let her bring in any evidence, and there you have it, folks.
Well, we got the Supreme Court coming up, so the Supreme Court's going to hear